So, UK politics is having an absolute normal one. There are two by-elections today, as we're aware. It's Wellingborough and Kingswood. I always get the two mixed up. There's also an upcoming by-election happening in Rochdale, who obviously have the stain of being one of the epicenters of the grooming gangs, and they haven't quite expunged that stain with their new candidate. But before we get into that, we are pleased to announce that Calvin Robinson has joined us. My good friend from GB News is now doing his Common Sense Crusade over on lotuseaters.com from 3 o'clock every Thursday afternoon. And to celebrate his launch, we are running a promo code, 50% off a gold tier subscription for the first 3 months. That's for new and existing subscribers. All you have to do is use the code CRUSADE when you sign up. And you can also send Calvin your video comments if you are a gold tier subscriber. Just make sure to start them with Dear Father Calvin for his fatherly advice segment, so that we know the difference between that and the podcast. So go sign up, get excited, and if you're watching live now, tune in about 2 hours. Right, so to the by-elections in question. So these are the Wellingborough and Kingswood ones. So Wellingborough is being run by Ben Habib of Reform UK, who you have spoken to. Fantastic interview here. Ben is very much on our side. If there's ever going to be a future leader of the Reform Party who isn't Nigel Farage, I certainly think it's Ben, and you did a great job as a fellow Reform candidate interviewing him, so go and watch that, everyone. But just...
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to direct your attention to the aesthetics range of merch that we have on the store. These are beautiful images that I think work really well as posters or mugs. So if you want to support us, going over to the merch store at shop.lotuseaters.com is easily the best way other than signing up on the website.
Just some details on the by-elections. Of course, if you are in Wellingborough and you're watching this, what are you doing? Go out and vote for Ben. The Wellingborough by-election was triggered by the deselection of Peter Bone MP, who was a Conservative MP, who was deselected like many Conservative MPs over a alleged sex scandal. The sex scandal in question, again, with many Conservative MPs, involved a young man. So he was kicked out after a parliamentary inquiry found that he had exposed himself to a male staff member who was trapped with him in a hotel room in Madrid. Very upstanding. Very good. So he then met the threshold for a recall by his local constituents.
Can I say something super quick on that?
Please do.
So Peter Bone was, at least, a fairly important MP.
He's a staunch Brexiteer.
He was one of the sort of quintessential backbench MPs that would try and pull the Tory party to the right.
Yeah. And fairly likeable as well, from what I recall. Like, if you'd stand up and ask a question or something, he wasn't sort of immediately obnoxious or anything.
I remember him having some strange stuff on COVID, but that is because he was a boomer near the end of his life. So
I'd forgotten that, or never knew that. But just, in the general sweep of Tory MPs, some are more likeable than others, right? Certainly from our side of the aisle, more right-leaning.
It's like picking your favourite disease, isn't it?
yeah, favourite bacterial infection.
Malaria.
But yeah, so yeah, it's a bit of a shame, or maybe it's not, maybe it's for the best that he was exposed. You did say alleged, so I actually don't know. I'm genuinely asking this. Was it proven, or...?
He disputes it.
All right.
Party say that they found him guilty for it. So I'm saying alleged because there has not been a criminal complaint and he's not been put through the courts.
That was the next thing I was going to ask. Right.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
But again, with the Tory party, even the accusation, many such cases. We've now had Crispin Blunt. We've just had Andrew Rosendale acquitted after how many years of a rape allegation. So this is just something that sort of plagued the post-2010 Conservative government. Doesn't look good, at least. And this is one of the compounding factors of why the Conservatives are currently losing the election, as well as repeatedly betraying us on Brexit and immigration.
There's all sorts of sleaze, isn't there? I mean, I remember it'd be a bit before your times when I was a little kid, but during the John Major years, it was just a constant thing that sleaze was attached to. Blair and Brown would always love to hark back to it, like the sleazy Tory party. But to be fair, it's across all parties, I think. It just seems odd to me that public officials would be so sleazy. It's like, apart from your actual day job, the only other thing you have to do is not be like, a sex criminal or a criminal of any type.
People drawn, I know what you're about to say.
Please
I'm going to presage it. But yeah, people who are drawn to power aren't very typical of the general population.
That's a fair point.
And that most people don't want to go into politics because of all of the negative stuff that's associated with it. Everyone hates you. You're assaulted from all sides. You don't get given any credit, even if you do a good job. And so most people are put off by that fact. And you've got to be very interested in power and very sort of self-assured to want to do it in the first place.
You're more likely, if you're in politics and media, going to have dark triad personality traits because you're going to be more focused on yourself. You're more drawn to power. You're more drawn to sex and wealth as an outgrowth of that power. So, and we're not saying that this is a reflection on Peter Bone's character, just a general sense of the sleaze, for example. Though something sleazy about this The Conservatives appointed his girlfriend as his replacement candidate. Now, if you were going to try and not look sleazy and try and win the seat, you wouldn't pick the alleged sex pest girlfriend as the guy to replace him.
So just to be clear on that, was he married, Peter Bone?
Yes.
He used to always...
Also cheated on his wife.
Oh, is that what happened, was it?
Yes.
With the person that's now standing for the
Yes. Not good.
That's how you avoid sleaze, isn't it?
Yeah. Were you going to refer to as used to talk about Mrs. Bone?
Yeah, all the time. Whenever he announced a question in Parliament, he'd always say, "Oh, Mrs. Bone would like to know."
Yeah. Well, Helen Harrison, who was a councillor and is now the MP candidate, wasn't Mrs. Bone, so he got himself into a bit of trouble there as well. The Kingswood by-election is actually because Chris Skidmore MP stepped down over the government's net zero policy. Now, the Chris Skidmore MP was the guy who signed the net zero by 2050 pledge into law under Theresa May's government. And the reason I mention this, I was on a panel with him 2 years ago at Tory Party conference, basically debating him because I'd written a policy paper saying the government's spaffing away money on net zero policies and they shouldn't do this. And they helped shape the nuclear financing bill, which is the only different bit of energy tech we should be investing in. And Chris Skidmore was asked a question, how did you change the net zero by 2050 mandate? How did you revise it down? And he just said, we just changed the law. And I looked at him and said, you didn't cost it. And he looked at me like I just sort of like slapped him with a towel or something. He was very, very bemused that he would not waste all of our money. So glad he's gone. Another wet bites the dust. So go vote Reform if you're in Wellingborough. Go vote Reform if you're in Kingswood. Because at the moment, the Tory candidates they're putting up are blooming useless.
I just want to say, actually, thanks for saying that, because you are a member of the Tory Party,
yes.
But you're just saying what you honestly think is the best for these elections. So I appreciate that.
I am a results-based man, and I know there are certain Tory MPs, basically Miriam Cates, who deserve to keep their seat. Other than that, the Conservative Party has committed complete suicide. It's going to go extinct at the next election, and you'd be hard-pressed to say that it doesn't deserve it. I hope you're elected in South Swindon over the Tory candidate, obviously. So I just wish Reform, as a floating voter, were a little bit more forthright. But I know
all I know is I'm voting Bow. That's all that matters to me.
Vote Bow.
I'm not a Swindon resident. I endorse the message. Anyway, so this is quite interesting on Kingswood. The Tories seem to be thinking the same thing as me because none of them are visiting Kingswood. So I've got a friend that lives in the constituency in Bristol, and she said that the Tory leaflets didn't start. Labour started early, Reform started early. The Tory leaflets only refer to the fact that the Labour candidate was living in Lewisham for quite a long time and has moved back to Kingswood to contest it because he was from there. He was the mayor of Lewisham. Why Lewisham needs a mayor, Lord only knows. And he's now been bussed in to do this. Analysis by Mail Online shows that fewer than a dozen Tory MPs has actually visited the place. And they've got a list just down here. So that's Sajid Javid, not someone you want campaigning for. He's standing in down at the next election anyway. And Jacob Rees-Mogg's one of them, as well as Lee Anderson and Robert Jenrick. Now, Lee Anderson and Robert Jenrick have been compromised in times, but they've at least voted along with our side of the fence and behind closed doors, having spoken with the people that work them and the MPs themselves. They are on our line of thinking. They're just hamstrung by the party apparatus. The reason I mentioned Rees-Mogg is because Rees-Mogg is getting redistricted. Rees-Mogg has become a bit of a linchpin behind the scenes of forces that would like to drag the Tory party more rightwards than it currently is. And his seat is under threat because the Kingswood seat, that's probably going to flip Labour, is going to be divided into two, and half of it is going to be hitched to his North Somerset seat. So people are going to say, with Rees-Mogg, is he going to get a Michael Portillo moment? For those who don't realise, Michael Portillo was once touted as a future leader of the Tory party, and because of redistricting in 1997, he was kicked out of his seat. So it's not
for being thoroughly unlikable.
Well, you say that, but he's done quite well on television since.
No, now I quite like Portillo now, but back then he was like a really smarmy, he was like a Tory boy cliche or something. Back then, he was thoroughly unlikable.
I can't say anything about
but
that.
Now, he's actually quite like him now. He's
I don't
very
like
different.
his
He's turned it
wardrobe
around,
these days. Very bright.
Oh, he does dress like a
tasteless.
Batman villain, yeah.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, but he's likable enough. But
well, he's also out now, isn't he?
That's true, yeah.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Tory party, many such cases.
I mean, who
there you
else
go.
would wear like a pink blazer? Come on. But again, back when he was
Tory
in
party
government,
members, maybe?
back when he was in government and stuff, he wasn't out.
Right.
So he's grown into himself, I think, Portillo.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No. But point being, I think it's very interesting that even sort of very well-established figures, primetime GB News hosts, entrenched in the Tory party, has seen both sides of the fence, is a Brexiteer, Jacob Rees-Mogg, even he could go extinct in the next election. So again, this is a seismic defeat the Tories could be facing, and it's not impossible that Ben Habib wins today. Again, very much hope he does. So these are the general election polls. So this is going to be symptomatic of these by-elections, the future of the election. Currently, Labour are polling at 44%, and Tories at 25%. Reform's ticked up to about 10%. I've seen the polling as high as 12%, which encouraging, particularly to nudge the Tory party to the right. And I think a lot of MPs are seeing the writing on the wall here, because I think there are well over 55 MPs now that are announced they're not standing at the next election.
That's mad.
I mean,
that's mad. I've never known anything like that.
There are 5 more in the next month, right? So the last few that just announced is Mike Freer, who we've already covered for stepping down because his office was firebombed by an Islamist, but he blames emails and social media. Coward. Bob Neal, who's from Bromley and Chislehurst, he's stepping down because his wife has cancer. Kwasi Kwarteng, the very short-lived Chancellor, is stepping down because obviously they did a coup against him.
Ben Wallace was in there?
Yes.
Cash?
Yeah, Bill Cash.
That's
Bill Cash is retiring because he's quite old. Alok Sharma, the fella who got knighted for being the COP ambassador and crying because they didn't ratify the Paris Accords. What a coward. Nikki Allen and Tracy Crouch. So just more names rolling through. The death toll keeps racking up. So why could the Tories be possibly losing? Well, we keep covering the reasons on the podcast, but why aren't they self-correcting ahead of the next election? This man right here. Again, I hate Michael Gove with a burning passion. I've made no secret about this. I once spoke to one of his advisors. I've told this story before. And he said that Michael Gove is the most conservative member of Parliament. Okay. And he said Miriam Cates is more national socialist than national conservative.
What?
So the front bench are calling their own backbenchers Nazis because they're doing some actual conservatism.
So just not using words correctly.
Yeah, they're just thick. Thick as concrete. Mike Graham could have grown them. So, point being, Michael Gove gave this interview to The Times a couple of days ago, and he said, there are record numbers of adults who have never left home or are joining the boomerang generation, forced to return to their parents well into their 20s, 30s and beyond, with the number of first-time buyers falling as young people grapple with the cost of living crisis and sky-high private rent sectors and rising house prices. Gove fears they could turn away from democracy and capitalism if the government doesn't find a way to solve the housing crisis. Gove is leading a campaign to introduce leasehold and rental reforms, and he said, if people think that markets are rigged and democracy isn't listening to them, then you get, and this is worrying to me, an increasing number of young people saying, I don't believe in democracy and I don't believe in markets. And you can see that in polling with people saying, I just want to fix this. I'd be prepared to have an authoritarian leader who would just fix this. And that is dangerous.
I think he's got it the wrong way round. Democracy is rigged rather than capitalism is rigged.
Well,
I mean, I think that's more common a belief than the other way around.
But by who? By who, Michael? I wonder who messed up the housing market. Do you want to know what I Control F for and couldn't find in here?
Immigration.
The word immigration. Not mentioned once. Not once. It's almost like he's just lying to you because they're the ones that raise the level of immigration. But don't worry, don't notice the effect of demand on housing, you racist. It's just about supply. We're just going to flat pack tower blocks from here to infinity to house all of Africa. Lovely.
It is lying by omission.
Yes.
To not talk about mass immigration when it comes to sort of a problem with housing, the housing crisis, housing markets. To not mention that you're bringing in net hundreds of thousands of people every year on year. That is a lie by omission. That's sort of exactly what it is. I mean, just look at the man. Tom Watson, I think, who I obviously don't like, called him a pipsqueak of a man. It's like
there is a photo in here of him being a fundamentally unserious person. I mean, this man basically pulls all the strings behind
children's TV presenter sort of look there.
Yeah, but he's masking himself as bemused while also actively destroying the country. So I've got no time for Michael Gove.
It's like a spitting image puppet or something. I don't know.
Plaster cast face. What he's referring to, by the way, in saying that young people don't like democracy, there was an Onward research paper from 2 years ago. I've referenced this before. And they said that 58 to 66% of voters 18 to 35 would support, quote, a strong leader who does not have to bother with parliament or elections. And 45 to 59% support, quote, putting the army in charge. Based. I spoke about this in trigonometry, actually. It's coming out soon. And I basically won the boys over. They said, well, we can't really argue with you. We do need a Bacaley.
The true argument is that it's tyranny by other means, but that clearly didn't come up, did it?
Sure. It's essentially that. Everyone realizes that democracy has very few avenues to hold elected leaders to account if they keep saying one thing and then just keep doing another. And both parties have the exact same message. So people are turning to increasingly desperate solutions to change the country being taken away from them. And I'm not shocked.
I would say I would just to play defense on behalf of the concept of democracy.
Boo!
It's just to say that, you know, there's many different flavors of it, aren't there? It's like saying you don't like soup. It's like, what flavor of soup are you talking about? There can be any number.
I don't like
right
liquid.
Now, we live in a flavor of democracy which isn't very democratic, but it doesn't always have to be that way. It can be, you can make
Of course,
it.
yeah. The Swiss have a different model of democracy than we do, don't they? Where they have lots of referenda and there's a lot more direct democracy about decisions. And I think that's better.
You could have a direct democracy, or at least something where you have loads and loads of referendums, or you could have a type of Russian or North Korean democracy where there's zero real democracy, right? So it's on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're at a not very good place.
I think my actual objections, sort of memetics aside, are that it puts your rights up for debate to public vote. So a majority can vote to take away, you know, your property and your money, your life, basically. And if a majority signs off on it, then it's fine. There's no consideration in the current system.
The tyranny of the majority.
Exactly that, yeah. You know, it's been something banded around even in the House of Lords. I think it was Lord Hailsham in 2011 said much the same thing.
I don't even think it's a tyranny of the majority, though, and this is what I think we're going to see by looking at the other by-elections and the current housing policy. I'm going to combine the two. It's the tyranny of a very proactive minority with an entrenched ethnic and religious in-group that act as a clientele class that have been imported by the political class to instantiate them forever. The reason I say that, speaking of housing policy, I wonder why the Tories are losing. Maybe it's because this is happening. So this is an exclusive from the Daily Mail that happened the other day. People, that have just moved, an elderly couple that have just moved to a new home. This is Jose and Ted Saunders, or Josie, sorry, and Ted Saunders, not two blokes. They were insulted and shocked when they received a strongly worded letter from the Northamptonshire Council, and they'd just moved into their £200,000 house. And the Northamptonshire Council said that we are going to forcibly buy your home through compulsory purchase to house asylum seekers. So they're going to literally take your homes away to house Tom, Dick and Abdul, who arrived yesterday with no documentation and are probably working in the illegal economy and are never going to economically contribute and commit crimes at much higher rates. Why are we obliged to house a bunch of men from God knows anywhere? Because the Tory party say so.
Because diversity is a strength.
It's at best our entertainment.
Our country is so strong right now, isn't it? You know, the economy is just doing so well. You know, recession last year.
Well, yeah.
Highest amount of immigration in history.
Africa has all that wealth just spread around that they're being so generous that they're exporting it everywhere. They have a great civilization, don't they?
You notice that diversity isn't a strength. Well, now that's a real problem. You should probably be interred or prosecuted for noticing.
I'm sure the next Labour government will do exactly that. There's a few more details on this actually in the Telegraph reporting. So the letter had said that the council was seeking a considerable increase in positive immigration decisions being made in favour of asylum seekers, mainly young men, almost exclusively young men, and the authority was struggling to source suitable accommodation for them. It said, the ideal long-term solution would be to provide accommodation by using empty properties that would benefit homeowners and the project. It said the council could not make compulsory purchase orders on this property. So they're saying, oops, we didn't realise you'd moved in because you just moved in. This went out to you by mistake. Bad. Okay, yes, turfing people out of their homes directly is worse, but why are you giving brand new properties in a housing shortage caused by immigration to immigrants subsidised by the taxpayer?
I think that the government trying to requisition property off of you, you know, sure, they're offering perhaps something equivalent to the market value, but
it's your own taxes back.
It's absurd that should be sort of not to get into dangerous ground, but that's why the Second Amendment exists in America, is stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, you should be able to defend your own property from confiscation by a bunch of foreign insurgents who broke into the country. They are
that's
actual
sort of
criminals.
Killdozer territory in my mind.
Well, let's not go there, maybe. Council C said that they had to adopt such tactics because of the faster processing of asylum claims by the Home Office. Oh, just kick it up the chain and blame everyone. Yeah, of course, it's never anyone's fault. Just the form got lost somewhere, I'm sure. In terms of trying to acquire more social housing, councils will adopt a variety of measures, one of them being identifying empty properties that they can bring back into use. It comes after the Telegraph revealed on Tuesday, and this is a real corker, the Home Office has quietly built up a stock of 16,000 properties for asylum seekers, despite house shortages. The properties were drawn from the private rental and social housing markets, and they're being used to house more than 58,000 asylum seekers across England, Wales, and Scotland. That's double the 29,000 asylum seekers in the so-called dispersed accommodation a decade ago. So it's doubled within 10 years under whose government? Who's been in charge all that time? Oh, would it be this particular mug? Yeah, it would. Thanks, Michael Gove. So Ben Habib actually met with the couple that were turfed out of their home. We can play a little bit of this.
So this letter was from the council, and you got this on the 12th of January. You moved in November, didn't you?
Yeah.
And you got this letter, and just spell out what this letter says.
That letter says that because the property is derelict, that they can compulsory purchase it. If there's any repairs to be done in it, they could take it off the price of the property.
Yeah.
And these properties are for migrants.
It's
what they want these houses for.
Extraordinary, isn't it? And how did you feel when you got a letter? You've moved into your new wonderful home, you settle down, law-abiding citizens, and you get a compulsory purchase order from the council accusing you of occupying a derelict home. How did you feel when you got this?
After paying 200,000 for it, we didn't feel very well.
No, it must have been one hell of a shock, mustn't it?
Not being funny, you don't get any other politician doing that.
Yeah.
Absolute credit to Ben there. It's in his constituency. Again, hope he wins because he's the only one calling for net zero migration. So, Tory party going to be absolutely destroyed. Covered that about 2 weeks ago now. Another quick example is Tobias Elwood as well. He had a Palestinian protest show outside his home, about 60 to 80 people in Bournemouth chanting ceasefire and free Palestine. Acts completely confused about the fact this has happened, but then has since said someone like as tepid as Liz Truss represents a move to the extreme right. Like, this is why in that previous live stream I just mentioned, Carl said they're in like late Soviet levels of denial and are unable to self-correct. This guy is the perfect example. Right, so what are we going to get instead? I'll finish up on the third by-election that's happening. This is Labour.
Ask a quick question.
Yep.
So, sorry, who exactly protested outside Elwood's house? Pro-Palestinian people?
Yes.
So what, has he been pro-Israeli?
Yes, he said we need troops on the ground.
Okay.
He's a member of the 77th Brigade, which is the cyber warfare psyops division, and he's also very pro-British troops in Ukraine as well. He's a super war hawk.
Right. Okay.
Elwood is like one of the most ridiculous neocon establishment Tories. Again, hope he gets absolutely wiped out electorally at the next election. So this is who we're going to get in instead of the next election. Were you familiar with this fella, the Rochdale candidate, Azhar Ali? So his endorsement was delivered in Urdu. So this is a bit of context here by Mohammad Najimi, who's actually a native speaker. And this Asfal Khan, he's translated the other candidates' endorsement of it. The reason this is interesting is because he says that only 8% of Pakistanis in Pakistan speak Urdu, but the Wilson Labour government in the 60s imported 50,000 of them from Mirpur, which is the Urdu-speaking region, which is particularly tribal and regional. So very low skill, low intelligence, not compatible values, basically crazy Islamists that often marry their cousins. And so that now has created a massive ethnic enclave in Rochdale, the exact kind of people that are perpetrating the grooming gangs, the rape gangs that were targeting white children. And so they have just become an ethnic bloc that allows candidates like these two to speak their language and say that we're going to vote only in your interests and against English interests and get elected as MPs. Now, call me far right, but I don't think we should be having foreign agitators in an already existing epicenter of child rape, campaigning off of their native language against the interest of Brits. Don't think that's very healthy. And it turns out when you have that, this is what you get. He's been deselected because he said that basically the Jews did a false flag on October the 7th. He got caught on tape, and this was leaked to the Daily Mail. And he said that he blamed, quote, people in the media from certain Jewish quarters, fueling criticism of Labour MP Andy McDonald, who was kicked out. He was the MP for Middlesbrough. And he said, between the river and the sea last year, basically, clear all the Jewish people out of Israel and therefore give it back to the Palestinians. So he got kicked out of the Labour Party because they're trying to reform their reputation of being anti-Semitic, not going so well. He said Israel planned to get rid of Palestinians from Gaza and grab all the land, and he boasted about preventing Israeli flags being flown from public buildings in Rochdale after the October the 7th attacks. So not great optics for a Labour Party who wants to not be seen as anti-Semitic. Now again, I'm not Jewish. not particularly offended by anti-Semitism. I'm not pro it. I just don't particularly care. Why is this a battle we're having in British politics? Why is Israel v Palestine affecting any of our local elections? Any of them? Why are any candidates getting deselected over this? It's really embarrassing for the Labour Party as well. It's actually too late to take his name off the ballot as a Labour candidate. So he's running as a Labour candidate, and if he wins, he will immediately have the whip withdrawn.
Our involvement ended in 1952.
Yeah, should have been. Yeah. Unfortunately, we mass imported all the foreign agitators that care about foreign terrorist groups. So now every single weekend, we've got hundreds of thousands of people marching through the capital city, my home city, calling for intifada. Thanks.
Sorry, diversity is a strength, though. So I'm not quite sure what you guys are talking about.
I'm sorry. I must be an ostrich, head in the sand. He actually retracted his apology and doubled down, apparently, behind closed doors. So he apologized, and the Labour Party still kicked him out. So now he's promoting graphics like this. So Starmer dressed as a clown with terrible Mid-Journey editing. He's saying, a strong voice for Palestine. Vote for Rochdale. Speaking for Palestine. Not for English people in Rochdale, speaking for Palestine, foreign land, as a local MP. Why is this happening?
It is mad that land dispute, that religious dispute, spills over into England, of all places. I mean, yeah, it's sickening.
Yeah.
It's sickening that it's happening. But from Labour's got a real problem, haven't they? On the one hand, got a massive amount of the Muslim vote. And on the second hand, Starmer apparently committed to stamping out anti-Semitism. Even the whiff of it, really.
His wife and kids are Jewish, aren't they?
Right. Well, yeah.
They attend synagogue, so it's a real issue.
So
it's on
he's
the
got
knife's edge, isn't it? Sorry.
I was just going to say, just politically, it's a real problem for Labour.
Well, it's the predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, was more or less ousted on anti-Semitism grounds, and they've got a large Islamic voting base. And if they push too hard in one direction, they're going to alienate one section of their voters. If they do too much the other way, it's another one. So,
and he's not the only one as well. So as of this meeting that was caught on tape and reported to the Daily Mail, there was another Labour MP that's now been exposed in Guido Fawkes. This guy is Graham Jones, and he was former Member of Parliament for Hindburn, who's trying to be re-elected in the seat again. And he referred to effing Israel and said to Ali that any Briton who goes over to Israel to fight for the IDF, which I think if you do have dual nationality, you can do, should be immediately incarcerated upon their return. That's not illegal.
Well, not ISIS fighters, but
exactly. Exactly.
That's Lisa Nandy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. More British Muslims joined ISIS than the British Army. And yet, oh no, we should bring back Shamima Begum. Think about her human rights. As I agree with you, we should drone strike her in the middle of the desert.
It's one of the few uses of tax money I actually approve of.
Yeah. Oh, give me the Xbox controller. I'll do it myself. They've now suspended.
I'll pay money to do it.
Yeah, they've suspended him too. The BBC understands Mr. Jones was suspended for comments he appears to have made about Israel, but Labour has yet to identify the specific remarks. I think I can hazard a guess. It might have been the ones that were just reported. Now, point being, why have I done all this? Well, it's not just to say, go out, support reform against the sort of Tory wets that they've stood up and clearly don't believe in, and to hold their feet to the fire, but it's also to say that, well, for the next 5 years at least, given the Labour government seems inevitable at this point, we're going to get religious sectarian politics, particularly Muslim, ethnic and religious in-group preferences. As you said, Labour on a knife's edge, trying to batten away accusations of anti-Semitism while also pandering to the Muslim vote. So we're in for some really hard political times ahead. So I wish I had some good news, but go out and vote is, I suppose, all I can encourage you with.
The only person standing between us and that sort of nightmare future that Labour will bring us is Starmer, one of the weakest men I've ever seen or heard.
Not fun.
Great.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Symposium series, this episode on Thomas More's Utopia. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.